right, raise your hand if you have an iPhone. Most of you in the room, most of you, I didn't say raise your iPhone. If you got a phone, you can put that away. Raise your hand if you have an iPhone. You did that. Love it. Most of you in the room. I am in the majority this evening, as I was with our Instagram poll about what the crock is called when the thing's on the back, sport mode. I'm also in the majority this evening with, this is my iPhone 11 Pro. I don't know if that's old by now or not. Very old, I heard. Hey, it works, and that's all I need. I love it. I have an iPhone 11 Pro, and on the top right corner of my iPhone 11 Pro, I see a battery bar. You probably have a battery bar on the top right corner if you have an iPhone, or if you don't have an iPhone or no phone, you're familiar with what a battery bar is. My battery bar is on the top right corner, and within my battery bar, I also have the percentage of battery that I have numerically listed next to it. So right now, y'all are going to be impressed by this, 95% battery charge on my phone. Thank you, everyone. 95% battery charge on my phone, and therefore my battery bar looks to be about 95% full right at the moment. And so it's interesting on your phone, like you have this option of like you can put the battery percentage on there or not. I don't know why anyone would like not have the number on there. Who doesn't have the number on there? Okay, that is less people than raise their hands for having an iPhone. So once again, in the majority, feeling really great tonight. I have the battery bar on my phone. Most of y'all are with me. And when my battery percentage is low, as you know, when your battery percentage is low on your phone too, what's that indicate? That indicates that your phone is probably going to die pretty soon. And audience participation, when our battery is low on our phones and we think the phone's going to die soon, what do? We charge our phone when it's about to die. Okay, now, I want you to think for a second about all of the places in your life where you have phone chargers. I'm going to name where I have phone chargers just for me. I have a phone charger in my office. I have a phone charger on my nightstand. I have a phone charger, I wrote them down. I have a phone charger in my car, and I've got a phone charger just permanently in my suitcase so that even when I'm traveling, I'm not going to forget. So I have 4 phone chargers. Before we got our little puppy, Winnie, who likes to bite things. Y'all know how puppies are. Sometimes they like to bite us, but I don't know if I prefer my dog biting me or objects. I really prefer don't bite anything. But before we had Winnie, we also had a 5th one underneath our couch. And so 5 phone chargers that were like just mine. And so I am curious to know in this room which one of you has the most phone chargers to your name. So I don't want you to think about like your parents' phone chargers, your siblings' phone charger. I just want you to think of yours. I don't want you to think of like other chargers outside of phones, like computers, things like that. I just want you to think about your phone chargers. I have 4, used to have 5. Think about yours. Okay, if you have, we'll start with 4 or more phone chargers, raise your hand. 4 or more. Okay? If you have, you can put your hands down as we go throughout this, but keep your hand up if you have 5 or more phone chargers. Okay? Less. Keep your hand up if you have 6 or more phone chargers. Okay, I think we can probably, no, still 2 hands. 7? 7 or more? Okay, I think we got 2. 7 or more, okay. 3 in the back. 8 or more phone chargers. Okay, we got 2. 9 or more phone chargers. 10 or more. 11 or more. How many you got? Oh my goodness. Wow. Wow. That is a lot of phone chargers. That is 4 times the amount of phone chargers that I have. That's impressive. Y'all give it up for Miss Harrington in the back. I don't know why we're clapping. I don't know why we're making this a competition, but it seems like something we should clap for. Sometimes when I'm just silent, everybody else gets silent too. I kind of like that one. Okay, here's where I'm going with this. We're talking about phones. We're talking about battery percentage. We're talking about phones dying. Us being really concerned with the fact that they're about to die, so we have anywhere from 4 on my end to 16 phone chargers to prevent the reality of our phone's death. We think a lot about the reality of our phone's death. And we know that with certainty, our phones are going to die if we don't charge them. So what do? We consider the best way to prevent their death. We put a battery percentage on there so we can see exactly how much time we have left. We put chargers everywhere. We put chargers on chargers, like chargers to charge the chargers. Y'all got them portable chargers that you bring that, like, you got to charge the charger? That's like how concerned we are with preventing the death of our phones. Did you know that the reality of your own death is just as certain as the reality of your phone's death if you don't charge it? Oh, shoot, he went there. Yes, he did. Yet, we spend a lot more time thinking about the death of our phones, a lot more time planning about the death of our phones than we do our own. That's pretty interesting, isn't it? If you didn't know by now, we're going to talk about death tonight. Oh, wow. It's going to be fun. Here's what I know about death. Death is certain. In fact, I would go so far as to say this to you tonight. Death is life's most certain reality. Death is life's most certain reality, meaning we can be more certain of the fact that we're going to die than any other fact that we believe. I'm not trying to be a downer. If you're here for like the first time, I'm like, welcome to Collective Death. I am so excited that you are here, so glad that you're here. And we don't talk about death every week, but I'll put this before you. We talk about substance every week. We talk about stuff that matters for your life every week. And death, as the most certain reality in life, is worth talking about. Death matters. What we think about death matters. The fact that we even think about it matters because every one of us in the room with certainty will one day die. That's not a spoiler. That's not a weird thing to say. That's the most true statement maybe I could say tonight. So our series on the Christian worldview that we've been going through, this is our 4th week and final week, and it ends tonight with Act 4. Remember, Christian worldview, a play with 4 acts, 1, 2, 3, 4, ends with Act 4, new creation, tonight. And so as a review, a worldview, this series on the Christian worldview, is a lens like my glasses through which you see and view the world. So much like my glasses I'm wearing, they determine how I view the world. The worldview that we possess, the way that we view the world, that determines how we think about things, that determines how we respond to things, that determines our answers to big questions. Your worldview, as I've put before you the last several weeks, what you believe about the world has to answer 4 of life's biggest questions. Your worldview has to answer them. Here they are. The origin question, where did I come from? The purpose question, why am I here? The morality question, how shall I live? And 4, the destiny question, where am I going? We've touched on those first 3 in certain ways, shapes, and forms throughout the past 3 weeks. And tonight, we're touching on the one that we haven't yet talked about so far, the destiny question. Where am I going when I die? Where are you going when you die? What happens with the certain reality of death that maybe we don't like to talk about, maybe we don't like to think about, but we talk about substance and stuff that matters here because death is coming. We don't know when we'll die. We don't know how we'll die. When we'll die and how we'll die is uncertain, but the fact that we'll die is quite certain. Our conversation tonight matters because if the Bible's claims about death are true, then you have got a really important choice to make. If the Bible's claims about death are true, then you have a really important choice to make. And here's what I'll put before you. Christianity offers both the best and the most beautiful explanation of death. Remember the past couple weeks we've been talking about it's one thing if your worldview is true, if you believe things about the world, and I believe, and many of us in this room believe, that the Christian worldview as outlined through Scripture is true, but not only is it true, it is the most compelling, the most beautiful way in which you see and think about the world. And tonight we're going to talk a little bit about what the Bible says about death and why that is not only the best but the most beautiful and compelling explanation of it than any other worldview there might be. And so here's where we're going. At the end of our service tonight, I'll give you the opportunity to consider your response to death. And where we're going is I'm going to give you an opportunity at the end of the night for you to choose whether or not you'd like to follow Jesus as your Lord and Savior. Whether or not you'd like to approach your own very real certain death with the hope that Jesus offers, rather than anything else that you're bringing to the most certain reality in your life. That's where we're going. So y'all, for the rest of our time together, hey, if you'd lock in, we don't need phones. Out here, we've got all the verses on the screen beside me. If you're taking notes, take it in your paper journals. But let's lock in for the rest of our time together tonight. Your main idea, your key takeaway for tonight is this. Your future can be as certain as your death. Your future can be just as certain as the very real certainty of your death. So, we're going to get excited as we do it collective, even when we're talking about death, and turn in God's Word to the book of Revelation. Love it. Revelation, the very last book of the Bible in the New Testament. Turn it over, open just a few pages in. You will be in the book of Revelation. As always, I'm going to read from the English Standard Version, the ESV. I'll have the verses on the screen beside me throughout the entire time. And so we are going to pick up in chapter 20, 11, and read through verse 8 of chapter 21. I'm going to read straight through the verses in the ESV right now. Then I saw, this is the author of Revelation, I saw a great white throne, and him who is seated on it. From his presence, earth and sky fled away, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and books were opened. Then another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged by what was written in the books according to what they had done. And the sea gave up the dead who were in it. Death and Hades gave up the dead who were in them, and they were judged, each one of them, according to what they had done. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. If anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was also thrown into the lake of fire. Chapter 21. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God." I love verse 4. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore. Why? Because the former things have passed away. Verse 5. And he who was seated on the throne said, Behold, I'm making all things new. Also he said, Write this down, for these things are trustworthy, and these things are true. And he said to me, It is done. I'm the Alpha, I'm the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give from the spring of the water of life without payment. The one who conquers will have this heritage. I'll be his God. He'll be my son. But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, as for murderers, the sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. The first idea these verses teach us tonight is this, is that you will face judgment. You will face judgment. Your future can be as certain as your death, and you will face judgment. Chapter 20, verse 11, shows us a picture of a great white throne. Earlier in chapter 20, verse 4, we didn't read this, but I'll show you what it says. Here's what it says earlier in chapter 20, verse 4. Then I saw thrones, and seated on them were those to whom the authority to judge was committed. So we see early in verse 4, these great white thrones, people sitting on them, given the authority to judge. So as such, we see here in our verses the great white throne, and the image that comes to mind, the reality that comes to mind is judgment. Verse 12 here, as we keep moving on verse by verse, pictures a group of people who have died in verse 12. It says, And I saw the dead, great and small. Group of people who have died, great and small people are pictured here, and that's not talking about height or weight or any demographic. That's talking about just the fact that no matter where you were or are in life, death is the great equalizer. It's the thing that everyone faces, no matter how much money you had, how famous you were, or how poor you were, the fact that nobody knew your name. Death is the great equalizer. I saw the dead, both great and small, all of them the same. Notice where they're located. It says in verse 12, I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne. The dead are standing before the throne. They're not seated on it, meaning they're not in charge here. Remember, this great white throne conveying authority, conveying this sense of judgment, and here are all these great, these small, everyone. They're standing before it, susceptible to it. They're not in charge. They're not in control. They're at the mercy of the one on the throne. The scene continues, and it seems like we're in like a library right here as the scene continues. Books were opened, then another book was opened. I believe this is going through verse 12. Books were opened, then another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the author here, what he does is he singles out this book and draws particular attention to it. All of these books were open, but then another one was opened called the book of life. Those standing before the throne, they're judged as the verses go down. The dead were judged by what is written at the end of verse 12 according to what they had done, which was recorded in all of these books that are opened before them. Someone's seated, God's seating on the great white throne, the dead, great and small, standing before him. And you see this picture of all of these books, of everything they had done, opened before them. That's the picture that we have here. And the author highlights this point, that they're judged according to what they had done, what is written and recorded in these books. He highlights it as he reiterates it and says the same thing in verse 13. Here's what it says. And the sea gave up the dead who were in it. Death and Hades gave up the dead who were in them, meaning all the dead people are here right now. There's a lot of them, like zombies, I don't know. And they were judged, the end of verse 13, each one of them, according, that same phrase, to what they had done. The text here, here's what it indicates. It indicates that our actions matter. The text indicates that God sees and knows our actions. And the text also indicates that our actions have consequences. And as we talk about that in these like existential and spiritual senses, sometimes we're like, I don't believe that. Let me show you that we just know and operate by this reality that our actions have consequences. I'm going to give you two examples. We know and operate in our normal everyday reality by this principle. It's embedded, I'd even say, in the physical nature of reality. So how many of you have ever heard of Newton's laws of motion? That sounds familiar? Newton's laws of motion. Do you remember the third law of motion? How many of y'all got that one like tattooed? I love science. I'm like, science. Here's the third law for those of you in the room. For every action in nature, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Every action has a reaction. Think about this. Said another way, every action has a consequence. That's embedded within nature. Within the reality that we take for granted, actions have consequences. Okay, now let's consider competing worldviews attempts to explain this reality. How do other worldviews attempt to explain this reality? Maybe you've heard of the word karma before. You've heard people who talk about karma, who believe in karma. It's often associated with other religions like Hinduism or Buddhism, kind of these Eastern mystical type religions. But I'd also say like this idea of karma, even if we call it something differently, is a function within many Gen Z, Gen Alpha worldviews. It's a very new age spirituality thing that's, just common to believe. Maybe you've heard it expressed something like this, what goes around comes around. You've heard, if somebody says something like that, they're talking about a karmic type of reality, meaning good karma is a positive consequence of doing good things. We do things, then we get good karma. On the other side, bad karma is a negative consequence of doing bad things. You do bad things happen to you. Here's what I'd tell you about karma. Karma sounds poetic, and I would also say that karma captures our innate desire for justice. Yeah, I do bad things happen. I do good things happen. I mean, we want that to be the case. It captures that desire for justice. I also would say, in relationship to our conversation, that karma captures our innate belief in the fact that our actions have consequences. Here's what I'd also say about karma. Karma sounds good, but karma's not real. And here's why I say that confidently. It's not crazy. I think you know this. Just think about it. All you have to do is list out good things that have happened to bad people or bad things that have happened to good people. Karma doesn't exist. If you can make a list with one example, even one in either one of those categories. If karma says that what goes around comes around, and I do good things, then I get good karma. Then if a bad thing happens to a good person, which I know you have an example of, or if a good thing happens to a bad person, which I know you have an example of, this isn't true. Y'all get that? That makes sense? I'm sure if you've heard the phrase, what goes around comes around, maybe you've heard the phrase, life isn't fair. Karma operates in the realm of fairness, but life operates in the realm of unfairness. What I mean by that is good things happen to bad people, bad things happen to good people. Life's not fair. Karma doesn't explain it. Let me paint you a hopeful picture. The picture that we see in our verses tonight, the picture that we see in the Christian worldview. The Christian worldview contains a God who rights wrongs and a God who punishes wrongdoers. That innate desire for justice that we have, the Christian God fulfills it. You and I live in a broken world full of broken people and broken things. And at the great white throne, the God of the Bible exercises justice. The justice we crave, the justice our culture craves, exists only at the great white throne pictured here, where all wrongs are righted. The people behind the problems you see in the world and in your own life as well, they're held accountable before this great white throne that we see here. Within the Christian worldview, justice is served, and so your suffering is not in vain. And because of that, Christians can have hope. And as I've challenged you every single week throughout this series, I invite you to offer a better worldview, a better picture reality, a more truer, a more beautiful picture of reality than this one. Show me another worldview that offers this sure, certain hope. I'm waiting. The second idea these verses teach us tonight is this, related to that, is you can have hope. Your future can be as certain as your death because you can have hope. Let me read Revelation 21, verses 1 through 4 again. Here's what it says. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people. God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. Do you see the hope in these verses? Do you see the hope in this picture contained within the way in which Christians view and think about the world? Look at verse 4, chapter 21, verse 4. Look at this. No more tears. No more death. No more mourning. No more crying. No more pain. Remember a couple weeks ago we saw that the consequence of our actions, of sin entering the world, was pain in those things that were meant to bring forth life. In the end, there's no more pain. Notice also who's the source of comfort in the Christian worldview. The God of the Christian worldview is the source of their comfort. Who wipes away tears? I love this. He, God, will wipe away every tear from their eyes. The Christian worldview offers a better and a more beautiful source of hope than a pint of ice cream, your favorite movie, yoga. Fill in the blank of things that when you can't even see out of your glasses because you have so many tears in your eyes, because you're faced with the reality of death of people in your life that you care a lot about, when you're mourning, when you're crying, when you're in pain, the picture we see here is a God who reaches down personally, wipes your tears away. You as an individual. I don't know about you, but that sure sounds like a God I want to live my life for. Show me a worldview that offers more hope, that offers more love, that offers a picture of a God who's often painted as this like ethereal, big, uninvolved, scary guy. This isn't what those types of gods do. The God of the Christian worldview comes to you and says, I know it's hard, but the reality that you can have when faced with the certain reality of death is one with no more pain, one with no more tears. You want a reality like that? I think your friends do. I think your peers do. I think our society and culture does. This is the reality that offers that hope. Maybe your worldview posits that when we die, and by posit I mean maybe your worldview is, that when we die, we're just dust and dirt in the ground. That's the end. If I'm honest, here's what that sounds like. Doesn't sound super compelling. Remember, we're not just after this is the most true, but also, given that reality, that's got to be the case. It's true, but it's also compelling. That's not compelling. I think it also pushes against our innate belief that we are a part of something bigger than ourselves. Like, do you realize that humans operate with that mentality? That we kind of just know that we're a part of something bigger than just ourselves. And the God of the Christian worldview, I believe, put that within each of us to point us to Him. I'd also argue that this worldview, that example that I'm giving you, certainly doesn't offer hope. Maybe your worldview says something like karma that we talked about earlier. I know there's something after death. I don't know what it is. I know that there's got to be something there. But if I do good enough, if I'm a good person, if the scale evens out, then I'll be okay. Two things. One, good luck. And here's two. Anxiety, not hope, is the outcome of that worldview. Anxiety, not hope, is the outcome of that worldview. That's an incredible amount of pressure that's placed squarely on your shoulders. Be good enough to be acceptable to whatever happens next. How good is good enough? When do you know if it's good enough? I guess I'll find out when I die if everything I lived my life for was good enough. Let me just tell you this. After you die is a really bad time to figure out that you're wrong and to figure out that you weren't good enough. That's why we talk about the things that we do here, because this stuff matters. You live around people that believe this stuff, that they genuinely believe they're good enough for whatever and whoever's next. Or maybe that's you. Like, Lukas, I'm good enough. Like, I can stand before that great white throne because of the good things that I've done. I haven't missed collective all year. I say good things. I recycle. I don't know. Do you see the hope in these verses in the new creation? In the new heaven and the new earth in verse 1, look what it says. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven, the first earth had passed away. Do you see the hope? God not only wipes away tears and takes away pain, but He makes all broken things new. He fixes things. That's what you and I want most. We want this brokenness fixed. Yet we live in a world that things should be getting better. If we're more technologically advanced than we've ever been before. We're sending people, to the moon and Mars, Pluto next year. I don't know what's going on. But here's what I see is not a world that's just better. What I see is that loneliness was proclaimed an epidemic in the past 6 months. What I see, especially in this generation, is that anxiety and depression are more real than they've ever been. Suicide is more prevalent than it's ever been. Is that better? Is that fixing things? I don't think so. The Christian worldview offers a God who fixes things with certainty. Good night, that's compelling. God deals with the brokenness in the world. I also want you to notice this. Notice the direction in these verses with which the new creation is traveling. Notice the language the author of Revelation uses. Verse 2, here's what it says. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, the new heaven, the new earth. The New Jerusalem is like just the city of God's people. I saw these things, what, in verse 2, coming down out of heaven from God. We can have hope, and our future can be as certain as our death, not because we've done good enough to work our way up into heaven, but because God brought heaven down to us. For the Christian, our eternity in heaven isn't based on our own good works. That brings hope and it relieves the pressure. We know better than anyone else how messed up we are. For the Christian, our eternity in heaven isn't based on our own good works. It's based on God coming down and making heaven accessible through His Son, Jesus Christ. That's the Christian worldview. The third idea these verses teach us tonight is this. It's not only can you have hope, but God offers hope freely. Your future can be as certain as your death because God offers hope freely. Let's read Revelation 21, verses 5 through 8 once more. Here's what it says. And he who was seated on the throne, the big great white one like the shark, said, Behold, I am making all things new. Also he said, Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. Like, as if the guy was going to forget the guy from the great white throne talking about him. He just wants him to be sure. This is trustworthy. This is true. And he said to me in verse 6, It is done. I'm the Alpha and the Omega, beginning and the end. To the thirsty I'll give from the spring of the water of life without payment. The one who conquers will have this heritage. This will be their reality. I'll be his God. He'll be my son. But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, as for murderers, the sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. These verses here depict God on his great white throne, proclaiming with authority that it is done. Creation is restored. Pain is no more. Tears, not a thing. Mourning, crying, done. He proclaims this, the end of 6 going into 7. He says, To the thirsty I will give from the spring of water of life without payment. To the one who conquers will have this heritage. I'll be his God. He'll be my son. I love how God says this. In heaven, the water of life, the sustenance of life, what nourishes you and sustains you is given how? Without payment. Also, look at this. In heaven, we're adopted by God. God brings us into his family forever. He offers this hope without payment freely. Talk about compelling. We can have a future as certain as our death because we serve a God who paid our payment for us. God sees everything that we've ever thought. He sees everything we've ever said. He sees everything we have ever done. And in fact, not only that, these verses show us that God keeps pretty meticulous records of everything we've ever said, everything we've ever thought, everything we've ever done. We see these books opened, and that's what's in them. Your life, every detail. God will one day judge all of us, great and small, equalized before the great white throne with the record of everything we've ever thought, said, did at his disposal. And let me just share with you, that judgment doesn't turn out well for you. You can accept that reality. No one knows better your own brokenness than you. It's okay in a place like this to come to terms with that reality because we're talking about big things that matter. Don't try to fool yourself into thinking you don't have to prove it to anyone, to yourself or to God. He knows it. Just accept it. The judgment won't turn out well for us, but our eternity isn't decided by all those books with all of our thoughts, all of our actions, all of our words. Our eternity is decided by another one. He mentions also this book of life. The book of life in these verses is where the certainty of our future is found. That's why the Christian doesn't fear death. We can enter heaven without payment. The only thing we have to do, here's what it says in Romans 10, verse 9. We can enter heaven without payment. We confess with our mouths that Jesus is Lord and believe in our hearts that God raised him from the dead, then we will be saved. Saved from what? Saved from the payment that we deserve because all of our thoughts, actions, and words were opened, and God and us were looking at them together. And he was saying, something's not right here. And it's not me, it's you. Saved from the payment we deserve to pay because of all of our thoughts, actions, and words. Christians trust in Jesus because of the verse that even if you're not a Christian, you know, we trust in Jesus because God so loved the world that he gave his only son that whoever believes in him should not perish but what? Have eternal life and hope with him on the other side of the certain death that all of us face. For the Christian, Jesus paid our penalty. We can stand great and small before the throne. And yes, the Father sees everything that we've done, but he also sees that Jesus paid it, and we're with him for eternity. The Bible also describes in our verses for those who aren't Christians that you pay your own penalty. And the penalty mentioned several times is this lake of fire. Maybe you've heard it called hell. Hell is real. The Bible addresses it. And it makes sense given our innate desire for justice and consequences that you and I both know that we have. It's not just embedded within nature and how we think about life. It's embedded in the metaphysical structure, existential existence, the spiritual world that we also kind of just know we live in. The choice is yours, a certain eternity with God who rights all wrongs and wipes away your very tears, or a certain eternity in a lake of fire, as these verses talk about.